Madera Companies, welcome back to Touch Base. We are entering into the final facet of this discussion we've been having regarding emotional intelligence, and I'm super excited to kind of bring this to a close, but just simply because it kind of gives us a culmination of everything we've been kind of talking through. If you will remember, I just want to make sure we're all caught up here. There are the 5 facets to emotional intelligence, and we've talked through all of these throughout this journey, right? You start with self-awareness. We moved into self-regulation. We talked through motivation. We just recently finished with empathy, and now we enter into the culmination of all of this, right? The last facet as we begin to talk about social skills. And just to kind of give us a working definition of what social skills are, they are the ability to connect, to interact, and to work with others. And that sounds relatively simple, rudimentary, elementary, whatever word you want to use. It sounds pretty simple, but the ability to connect with people, to healthily interact with people, and to work with them towards a greater cause, towards accomplishing great things. It's difficult. It can be super difficult. And so as we jump into this, you've kind of figured out the drill by now. I typically start us off with a story. I'm going to tell you a story that I get to tell quite a bit. I've gotten a chance over the last few years to do some guest speaking at different places, some of the local universities here in Lubbock, or businesses, churches, nonprofits. And the topics that we've talked about, or the stories that I've told, have kind of ranged from anything that helps us talk about ambition, to leadership, to humility, even, surprise, surprise, emotional intelligence. And I want to share with you one of my favorite stories as we tackle this last facet. Over 200 years ago, a man in civil clothes rode past a small group of tired and battle-weary soldiers. They were digging what appeared to be a very, very important defensive position, kind of creating a little bit of a trench for them to be able to hide behind for when the enemy came up. And the leader of the group wasn't really making any effort to help them. He just kind of shouted out orders from his horse, and he basically threatened to punish the entire group if they didn't get their work finished within the next hour. All of a sudden, a stranger on horseback comes riding up, and he looks at the man on the other horse, and then looks at the men who are down there digging this trench, this foxhole, and he says, "Why aren't you helping?" And the leader looks at him and says, "I'm in charge. The men do as I tell them. That's how this works." He goes, "You can get off your horse and you can help them if you want, if you feel so strongly about it." And to the mean leader's surprise, this man who's supposed to be a great leader in the army, the stranger gets off his horse and he helps the men until the job is finished. Before he leaves, the stranger looks at the men, he congratulates them on their work, tells them thank you for their service, and he approaches this really not great leader. He tells the man, he said, "You should notify top command the next time your rank prevents you from supporting your own men, and I will provide a more permanent solution for you and for them." It was then that the mean leader, the one who refused to get off his horse and help, realized that the man he was speaking to was General George Washington, and that was going to be a lesson he would never forget. See, social skills are huge, right? This ability to connect and to interact and to work with others. And when you think about this story of George Washington, I'm continuously blown away that more leaders don't realize that you've got to earn credibility, you've got to build credibility, and you do that in a lot of ways by having the social skills necessary to build a team, to be a part of a team, to grow with your people, to be able to achieve great things. Now, this entire conversation about social skills is not about becoming a leader, but sometimes that's the fruit of great social skills and great emotional intelligence. And so that's going to be where we kind of focus today. Hear me again. The point of this talk or conversation is not about being a leader. That's a fruit of having great social skills and great emotional intelligence. And so let's start off with this. There's really 7 facets to the social skills that kind of lead us along the way. The first is communication. This is a big one, right? We talk about this all the time. What's missing in so many organizations sometimes? It's good communication. It's something that we aspire to do well here with the Madera Companies, to be a good group of communicators across all levels. And part of that communication, even on an individually based level, is to manage and direct your mood in healthy ways, to read emotional cues, to adapt your message as necessary, to actively listen to build common understanding. We don't actively listen just to speak or just to answer. We promote open communication with others. We welcome all information sharing, including bad news or criticism. And in the midst of all of this, the good communicator can stay calm, can stay positive, and focused on what's ahead. The next facet is collaboration and or cooperation, kind of how those work together. It's the balance between delivering tasks and preserving relationships. It is to collaborate by sharing information, resources, and efforts, to promote a specific culture, to build common identity, to talk through your shared vision for motivation and commitment. Collaboration and cooperation are intimately wrapped up with identity and this idea that we need to cultivate new opportunities for people to step forward and for us to go wherever we're going together. And that's the movement, right? From being individuals to working for great causes in groups. This next facet is a big part of this, and you'll see how these things kind of grow together. The third one is building bonds, to cultivate mutually beneficial relationships, both inside of our work and out, both as we work together and on the task, but also just together in our offices as we make passing comments here and there and ask each other about what's going on in our lives and how's your family and how's life with you and what's going on in your world. To make and maintain these friendships with coworkers and in other places of influence, to build relationships with people who can further educate and mentor you. We've talked about that, right? That there's an important piece to understanding you don't know it all, and you need to build bonds with people that can mentor and educate you, can help you grow up in other areas. And a part of this, and these are the small things that often get forgotten when it comes to building bonds. Practice good eye contact, right? Like look at people, manage your digital distractions, right? I mean, how difficult is it to have a real conversation with somebody when all of a sudden they continue to pull out their phone, they're looking at their Apple Watch or whatever it is. And in the midst of all of this, a big piece of it is the vulnerability that comes with me being real with you and you being real with me. And in this authenticity, we start to realize, man, we can do good things together. Now, as we kind of work through that, what inevitably comes with people and being together is conflict, right? But if we've done the work of communication, if we've done the work of collaboration and cooperation, if we're doing the work of building bonds together, then we can do conflict management well. Part of conflict management is being a non-anxious presence, to be a de-escalator, to win people over arguments. I mean, consider our world today and consider especially the tone of what feels like the environment of our country right now. That fear and anger and then just this shortness and the tone with which people speak to people is often demoralizing, I'm sure. And I know many of you folks on property, man, you've put up with a lot of things over the last few years. And I just want you to know, man, we are proud of the way that you've handled yourselves. As we do this conflict management thing, it is important, though, that as people in our positions, we lead, if you will, or interact, if you will, in non-anxious ways, that we are de-escalators, that we encourage respectful debate in our teams, that we're willing to change our own minds, and we expect in our teams that as new information and as we collaborate and communicate and do all of these things, we're all willing to change our minds for the greater good and for the greater opportunity to achieve more. That we facilitate relationship building and win-win solutions for as many people as we can bring into the fold. That at times we may have to agree to disagree, and that's okay. And that we pay attention to our own body language, we pay attention to our own tone and our nonverbals, but then we also recognize those things that are kind of coming back at us and realizing the person across the table from me or this person speaking with me, they're having a rough day or they're having a rough time kind of walking through this. As these last four facets begin to build together, you start to have influence with people. You start to have the opportunity to really make an impact. But to do that, to follow through on the influence that you've been building with others, it's important that you highlight your commonalities, that you build alliances with these people, that they understand you're in it with them, right? You appeal to values, which is huge, because when you appeal to values, it allows everybody to rally around something that's bigger than you and bigger than them. And then you can integrate emotional drivers. And what that means is we integrate opportunities to celebrate together. We integrate opportunities when even if we fail together. And that continues to build this influence that we're looking for and hoping for. When we talk about influence, we're not talking about manipulation. We're not talking about doing all of these things in order to get people to do what we want them to do. What we're talking about is being able to guide and to persuade others in a good direction that it's healthy for all, which is why the communication piece and the bond building is so important. As you recognize your influence, to be a steward of that is to understand that you can make change. But to be a change catalyst, it's important to do several things well, right? We've got to identify and build awareness around the need for the change, right? Because oftentimes, and I think this is an important thing, right? If you don't sell people on the need for the change and show them why we need a change, then your solution to that change is going to feel like a problem. But if they recognize the change needed, then all of a sudden your solution or the opportunity to dream with you about solutions becomes something that even they recognize is either a need or they're excited to help you follow through on. It creates safe environments for change to happen when we do that. And part of creating that safe environment is recognizing and then honoring, like I said a second ago, the anxieties associated with the change. Now, in the midst of this, it is important for you to verbalize and then role model the type of change you're wanting towards these new solutions that will bring about not just a healthier teamwork on site, but even just as a person. And I think it's also important to recognize as people, as people who work in businesses that are constantly evolving, one, to survive, to grow, to become healthier in every possible way, change is inevitable. And it's needed. And so we have to do it well in order to be true, healthy change catalysts in the various places. Now, if you do all of these things, this is what studies, data, this is what even experience will teach us, right? If you do all of these things well, going all the way back to the very beginning, right? If we communicate well, if we collaborate well, if we build bonds, if we do conflict management and navigate being a de-escalator and winning people over arguments, we will have influence and then we'll be able to create change. And then maybe we move into places of leadership. Maybe we move into places where we can guide and direct others in that type of a role. When you find yourself in a place where you get to lead, you step forward to do so when required, but always understand a leader is never not a servant, which is why we told the George Washington story at the very, very beginning, right? George Washington is the leader of the entire army, and he's digging ditches with his men because that's what a servant leader does. That's what we're shooting for. That in the midst of this opportunity to lead, you're always supporting and you're helping develop others, but not micromanaging them. And leaders always lead with EQ. They lead with these facets that we've been talking about from the very beginning. At least that's what good leaders do. That's what we aspire to be. This is that conversation of how we walk through all of these different facets of living out great social skills. And then at some point, if we end up in leadership positions, here's how we can do it and here's how we can do it well. As we wrap up this conversation on emotional intelligence, as we kind of finish out the fifth facet, okay, social skills, I'm excited to bring in next week a conversation with Dave Gillis. He is the CEO of Madera Residential of Rockwood and Quext. It's going to be a great conversation, and Dave does all of these things really well. He'll have some great insights, and so I hope you will join us next week, that you will see how Dave kind of wraps it all up for us. And then at the same time, remember that social skills, remember that all of the facets that we've been talking about, that these are parts of our dynamic journey. We don't arrive, we just keep moving forward. So with that said, I encourage you to keep moving forward and I encourage you to join us next week. Have a good one.